Hi everybody, I'm Professor Rad, and today we're going to wrap up our arithmetic class by applying our equation techniques to solving some problems. So we're going to work through a couple examples together in this video, and this first one is dealing with completing a table. So in a previous video, we talked about the serving size and how it can be used to give us a rough estimate for the number of calories in a sandwich at McDonald's. And I think we might have even filled in a table at that time too. So let's just highlight some information so we can kind of summarize this info in our heads here. So we have the serving size in grams. That can be used to get a rough estimate for the number of calories. And then we have our formula, C equals 2.8S minus 47. S is the serving size, which I did in green. And C is the number of calories in pink. Okay, so calories is pink and serving size is green. So serving size is S and calories is C. Okay. So I've kind of organized my information here, making sure I know which column represents which variable, because the difference between this problem and a problem we saw in the past is in this problem, sometimes we know a serving size and sometimes we know a number of calories. In the past, we only knew serving sizes. So we're going to see what happens if we kind of change up which column the number is in. So let's start out with our serving size of 115 grams. So let's start out with S equaling 115 grams. Our equation is that C is 2.8S minus 47. So S is 115, so we can substitute that in for S in the formula. And then we just got to figure out what that is. So 2.8 times 115 minus 47 is going to give us 275. Okay, so we get 275 calories. So far, that's exactly the same as what we saw last time we saw questions like this. Now let's shake it up a bit. So here we are told 541 is the number of calories. So we're told that C is 541. So when I substitute into my equation, because this is C instead of S, I'm going to replace C with 541. And I don't know S. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So I have to leave the S in the formula. Do you see how this is different now? Because before, I just threw this into my calculator and got an answer. I can't do that here. Now I have an equation to solve. So this is why this is our applications of equations. We're applying the equation techniques to solving this question. So our goal in solving equations is to use the addition property to get all the variables on one side and all the non-variables on the other. So this 2.8S term is the only one that has a variable, and it's on the right. So let's get rid of this negative 47. Since we're subtracting 47, we're going to add 47 to undo that subtraction. We'll do 541 plus 47, and that gives us 588. Okay, now one of the things that happens in real world formulas and stuff is often you have, numbers that aren't whole numbers. And that's okay. We're going to work with them exactly the same way as we would as if this was just 28 instead of 2.8. On the right-hand side, we now have 2.8 times s. So we want to undo that times. The opposite of multiplying is dividing, so we're going to divide both sides by 2.8. Ooh, 210. So that means we get 210 as our answer, so we can fill that in the box. And it looks like the serving size is measured in grams. All right, cool. So if you have a table, what you really want to be careful of is making sure that you are substituting the values into the equation in the correct spot. So sometimes when you substitute in, you can just throw it in your calculator, get an answer right away. But other times you might get an equation that you need to solve after you substitute in. This is a really common type of question in statistics. I'm actually teaching this kind of stuff in my stats class right now. So making sure that you substitute into the correct spot is like super important. All right, let's do another example. Well, this looks like a short problem. Is it going to be? We'll find out. It says determine the length of a rectangle that has a perimeter of 500 feet and a width of 75 feet. Okay. So let's draw a picture, right? Pictures are usually pretty good at anchoring us with geometry questions. So we've got a rectangle. It has a perimeter of 500 feet. And a width of 75 feet. And we don't know the length. All right, let's see how we might model this algebraically. In other words, how might we get an equation from this? And then how can we use that equation to help us solve for L? Well, one thing I'm noticing is that I was able to diagram the 75 feet and the L in this rectangle, but I wasn't able to diagram perimeter. What does perimeter mean? So perimeter means distance around. So I know that the distance around the rectangle is 500 feet. So to find the distance around, I would add up all the sides, right? That's what we would do to get our perimeter. So if I add up all of the sides together, I should get 500. So 75 plus L plus 75 plus L should get me 500. Oh, I am so happy now because now I have an equation. So for these kinds of questions, sometimes the trickiest part is coming up with that equation. Once you have the equation, you can solve it. So the techniques that I usually use to help me come up with that equation is I basically do what I did. I was like, I have this shape, I've got everything labeled on it, and then I've got this extra info that I haven't included in that diagram. I've just sort of listed it. I haven't used it. So if you're trying to come up with an equation, think about what information you haven't used yet. And is there another way to describe that information, or is there another way to combine that information with the numbers that you've used? So in this case, perimeter Well, I know that's distance around, so I can incorporate it with this other info I have. Again, I mean, I knew what to do because I've done millions of these questions. The more of these problems that you solve, the easier it will become to identify patterns and track those kinds of things. Don't be afraid to play around with stuff and see if you get, trial and error is a thing that happens during problem solving, right? Like if you're trying to solve problems in your real life, you don't always get it right the first time, right? Sometimes you try something and it doesn't work, so you got to try something else. That's how these work too, right? So in a math class, it's kind of tough because, especially making a video like this, because how do you tinker around with this? So feel free to kind of play around and see if you can get an equation that kind of makes sense. Now that I have this equation, I want to simplify this left-hand side because it looks kind of like a mess. So 75 and 75, we can combine those terms to get 150. And then I have 1L plus 1L to get 2L. Okay, so the L's are all on one side, and I just have a number here. So let's move this number over. Since it's a positive 150, I'm going to subtract 150 from both sides to move it on over. Gives me 350. And then let's see, we have 2L is 350. So 2 times L gets me 350. So to undo times, I'm going to divide. And I get 175 feet. Let's check. So I'm going to check to make sure the perimeter is going to be 500. So instead of L, I'm going to put 175 here. So 75 plus 175 plus 75 plus 175. Yes, it's 500. Okay, so for my check, I did that, but to show that I did that, I'm just going to rewrite it down here. Hooray! All right. So, got a few questions here for you to try on your own. So we've got some formula questions, we've got some geometry questions, we've got like this table kind of question. This video also is our last video for the arithmetic course. So I hope you found these videos helpful during the course. Yeah, I hope to see you in the future in some other classes like statistics. I've got a bunch of stats videos. I've also got some pre-calculus videos and linear algebra. So depending on your math trajectory, I hope you find them to be helpful. Have a wonderful life, and have a wonderful life. And I hope to see you in the future. All right, bye everybody.